Chapter 968. Princess Wenqing, you are indeed a forgetful person. Yan Juexing sneered. A mass of black murderous aura came out from his body and wrapped around his whole body. When the black murderous aura was sucked back into his body, his original appearance was revealed. However, his face was still pale, which was the result of his serious injuries. Yan Juexing. Hipster's voice was trembling. She looked outside the palace and suddenly understood everything. No wonder there was no response from the people outside. It turned out that he had returned. In an instant, tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes and slid down her cheeks. The child who popped his head out from behind her saw Yan Juexing's body emitting black smoke and shrank back in fear. However, when he saw his mother choking and crying, he came out like a little adult. He crossed his arms in front of him and said in a childish voice, "Don't hurt my mother." However, it was obvious that the little adult was shivering. He had never seen someone who could change his appearance. Obviously, he was still afraid. However, in order to protect his mother, he still stood out resolutely. "She is your mother?" Yan Juexing snorted. He grabbed the child's clothes and brought him in front of him. He said indifferently, "Who is your father? If you don't tell me, I will throw you to death." Someone actually touched his woman. It was easy to imagine his mood. The child immediately waved his fists and kicked his legs. He shouted in the air, "Bold slave, let me go. My father is the most powerful person in the world. If my father comes and sees you bullying my mother and me, he will not forgive you." Yan Juexing was slightly stunned. The most powerful person in the world couldn't be Yu Qianqiu, right? He thought it was ridiculous. He immediately snorted, "Then I would like to see your most powerful father in the world. Tell me. What is your father's name? Where is he?" As he said, he raised the child over his head and was about to throw him. "Bold slave, my father is Yan Juexing. Let me go, or my father will not forgive you." The child was still struggling stubbornly. However, the name he said stunned Yan Juexing. After a shiver, he slowly turned around and looked at Wenqing in disbelief with a questioning look. Tears gushed out of Wenqing's eyes. She bit her lips and nodded to Yan Juexing, indicating that he was his son. Yan Juexing was stunned on the spot. Hipster walked up to him and easily took the child from his arms. She comforted the child who was glaring at Yan Juexing angrily and said with a choked voice, "Yun, he is the father that you miss every day. Mother lied to me. He is a bad person. My mother said that my father loves me the most. This person bullied me. He is not my father." The child pointed at Yan Juexing's nose and said. Yan Juexing swallowed his saliva with difficulty and asked with a trembling voice, "You said he's my son?" He choked and said, "Mother lied to me. You lied to me. Father doesn't love me at all. He said he wanted to throw me to death. He is a bad person." The more he cried, the sadder he became. It was as though the sky in his heart had collapsed. He was too disappointed. Yan Juexing was dumbfounded. He wanted to slap himself. Why didn't he ask clearly and hit a child the moment he came in? For a moment, this infamous demon in the cultivation world was so anxious that he didn't know what to do. Sweat appeared on his forehead. He looked at Wenqing and wanted to say something but stopped. He didn't know what to say. Wenqing comforted the child in her arms with tears in her eyes. She looked at Yan Juexing and complained, "Don't you have anything good to coax him? Something good?" "Yes." Yan Juexing suddenly patted his head. The demonic blade flew out and floated in front of him. For him, the only good thing he had on him to please his son was the demonic blade. The sharp curved blade was shining with a blue light with red shadows. It emitted a beautiful and charming color. The dark blade had a strange demonic pattern that exuded an ancient aura. A unique and nimble crescent moon swayed on Wenqing's shoulder. Little Yan Yun only took a peek at it. His eyes suddenly lit up. He immediately looked up and wiped his tears. He stared at the demonic blade and licked his lips. He was attracted on the spot. Although wenching wasn't a person in the cultivation world, he could tell that it should be a weapon. He couldn't help but roll his eyes at Yan Juexing. He smiled through his tears and said coquettishly, "Is there such a thing for a child to play with? Aren't you afraid of hurting him?" Yan Juexing saw that his son liked it and had stopped crying. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He waved his hand and said, "It's okay. If I don't let it hurt people, it won't hurt people." Little Yan Yun, who was crying so hard just now, immediately forgot what sadness was. After all, he had the temperament of a child. He slid down from his mother's arms. The tears on his face hadn't dried yet, but he bit a finger. He raised his head and looked at the demonic blade floating in the air. He seemed to be wondering how it could fly. Yan Juexing's eyes lit up. He immediately controlled the demonic blade to fly around the house. As expected, it attracted little Yan Yun to clap and cheer. Not to mention little Yan Yun, even wenching was seeing such a magical thing for the first time. His eyes lit up. He didn't know how the demon god would feel if he knew this scene. The weapon he had personally refined had become a toy for a child to play with. Not long after, little Yan Yun completely let go and chased the demonic blade around the house. However, the physical strength of a child was limited. After a long time, he naturally became tired. In the end, he hugged the demonic blade and fell asleep. Under wenching's guidance, Yan Juexing placed him on a small bed and gently covered him with a blanket. At this moment, the pair of husband and wife looked at each other seriously. After a moment of shyness, Wenqing asked with concern, "Why do you look so pale?" Yan Juexing shook his head and said, "You've suffered all these years." These words made Wenqing cry again. He choked and said, "It's okay for me to suffer. I'm just afraid that the child will not have a father in the future." No one would have thought that this was the unruly princess who disguised herself as a man and ran amok in the capital. Yan Juexing tilted his head to look at little Yan Yun, who was sleeping soundly. A trace of fear flashed in his eyes. If he hadn't escaped quickly, he would probably have lost his father. He gently let out a breath and comforted Wenqing in his arms. Then, he said something to Wenqing's ear and suddenly carried Wenqing horizontally. He walked towards the bed inside, causing Wenqing to exclaim shyly. The clothes of the man and woman on the bed fluttered in the wind. Not long after, two naked bodies were entangled together. Waves of panting and moaning were covered by a soundproof barrier. This time, Yan Juexing did his best to serve Wenqing, somewhat like making up for it. After the deed, the two of them hugged each other. Their hearts were connected and they talked about everything. Yan Juexing told Wenqing about his background in detail, as well as what he had experienced all these years. He didn't hide anything, including how he had suffered a few losses at the hands of Yu Qianqiu. Wenqing was just a mortal. This was the first time she had heard of the exciting and bizarre stories of the cultivation world. She was even more impressed by Yu Qianqiu, who had tried to kill Yan Juexing time and time again. Chapter 969. Princess Wenqing, you are indeed a forgetful person. Yan Juexing sneered. A mass of black murderous aura came out from his body and wrapped around his whole body. When the black murderous aura was sucked back into his body, his original appearance was revealed. However, his face was still pale, which was the result of his serious injuries. Yan Juexing. Wenqing's voice was trembling. She looked outside the palace and immediately understood everything. No wonder there was no response from the people outside. He was back. In an instant, tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes and slid down her cheeks. The child who popped his head out from behind her saw Yan Juexing's body emitting black smoke and shrank back in fear. However, when he saw his mother choking and crying, he came out like a little adult. He crossed his arms in front of him and said in a childish voice, "Don't hurt my mother." However, it was obvious that the little adult was shivering. He had never seen someone who could change his appearance. Obviously, he was still afraid. However, in order to protect his mother, he still stood out resolutely. "She is your mother?" Yan Juexing snorted. He grabbed the child's clothes and brought him in front of him. He said indifferently, "Who is your father? If you don't tell me, I will throw you to death." Someone actually touched his woman. It was easy to imagine his mood. The child immediately waved his fists and kicked his legs. He shouted in the air, "Bold slave, let me go. My father is the most powerful person in the world. If my father comes and sees you bullying my mother and me, he will not forgive you." Yan Juexing was slightly stunned. The most powerful person in the world couldn't be Yu Qianqiu, right? He thought it was ridiculous. He immediately snorted, "Then I would like to see your most powerful father in the world. Tell me. What is your father's name? Where is he?" As he said, he raised the child over his head and was about to throw him. "Bold slave, my father is Yan Juexing. Let me go, or my father will not forgive you." The child was still struggling stubbornly. However, the name he said stunned Yan Juexing. After a shiver, he slowly turned around and looked at Wenqing in disbelief with a questioning look. Hipster burst into tears and nodded to Yan Juexing with misty eyes. He bit his lips and nodded to Yan Juexing, indicating that he was his son. Yan Juexing was stunned on the spot. Hipster walked up to him and easily took the child from his arms. She comforted the child who was glaring at Yan Juexing angrily and said with a choked voice, "Yun, he is the father you miss every day. Mother lied to me. He was a bad person. Mother said that father loves me the most. This person bullied me. He is not my father." The child pointed at Yan Juexing's nose and said. Yan Juexing swallowed his saliva with difficulty and asked with a trembling voice, "You said he's my son?" He couldn't believe that he actually had a son after just one night with the hipster. Hipster nodded again and said with tears in her eyes, "Not long after you left, I found out that I was pregnant. I was full of joy and looked forward to giving you a surprise when you came back. But I waited and waited, and you never came back. After I gave birth to Yun, for 10 months, I still looked forward to your return every day. But you have been gone for 6 years. Yun is already 5 years old. Why are you so cruel? You always come quietly and leave quietly. Why don't you care about my feelings? Do you know how embarrassing it is for a girl like me to get pregnant out of wedlock? I almost didn't dare to take a step out of Wenqing Palace all these years. Have you ever thought about how painful it was for me? Have you always treated me as your plaything? You come when you want and leave when you're tired of playing with me? You don't even bother to say hello. Am I so unbearable in your eyes? If that is the case, then please leave. Don't torture me over and over again. Mother, don't cry." The child helped Hipster wipe her tears in her arms. Then, he shouted at Yan Juexing, "Bad person, get lost, or I will get someone to beat you out." Yan Juexing stood there motionlessly. Looking at the mother and son, he had mixed feelings for a moment. He thought that he would be beaten up like a homeless dog. He never thought that his impulsive action back then would give him a home here and a son. If he had really died in the hands of Yu Qianqiu, then he would still have his flesh and blood here. The monotonous expression on Yan Juexing's face changed greatly. He walked over excitedly and opened his arms to embrace the mother and son. He buried his head in Hippie's ear and murmured, "I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Please forgive me. I won't come and go silently in the future. Don't worry. Don't worry. I'll never come and go silently again." What is Yun's full name? Hippopotamus whimpered incessantly. After a long while, he choked with sobs and said, "Yan Yun, a homonym for passing clouds and smoke. I thought you thought of me as a passing cloud and would never return, so I gave him this name." Yan Yun? Yan Juexing pondered for a moment and nodded. A swan's ambition can reach the clouds. Good name. Not bad, not bad. His son was naturally good. Yan Yun was a smart child. Although he didn't quite understand what Yan Juexing and Hipster were talking about, he figured out that the stranger who said he would kill him was really his father. Instantly, he burst into tears. Yan Yun was a smart child. Yan Yun didn't understand what Yan Juexing and Hipster were talking about. He bawled loudly, and he was extremely heartbroken. His crying made Hipster unable to cry anymore. She pushed Yan Juexing away and asked the child, Yun, what's wrong? Yan Juexing was flustered. He looked at the child helplessly and said nervously, Did I not know how to control my strength and hurt him? Yan Yun turned his head and buried it in his mother's embrace. He choked and said, Mother lied to me. You lied to me. Father doesn't love me at all. He said he wanted to kill me. He is a bad person. The more he cried, the sadder he became. It was as though the sky in his heart had collapsed. He was too disappointed. Yan Juexing was dumbfounded. He wanted to slap himself. Why didn't he ask clearly? Why did he hit a child the moment he came in? For a moment, the notorious devil in the world of cultivators was so anxious that he didn't know what to do. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead. He looked at Hipster and wanted to say something, but then hesitated. He didn't know what to say. Hipster comforted the child in his arms with tears in his eyes. He looked at Yan Juexing with a good mood and complained, Don't you have anything good to coax him? Something good? Yes. Yan Juexing suddenly patted his head. The demonic blade flew out and floated in front of him. For him, the only good thing he had was the demonic blade to please his son whom he had just met for the first time. The sharp curved blade was shining with a cold blue light with red shadows. It emitted a magnificent and charming color. The dark blade had a strange demonic pattern that exuded an ancient aura. A unique and nimble crescent moon swayed on Hipster's shoulder. Little Yan Yun only took a peek at it. His eyes suddenly lit up. He immediately raised his head and wiped his tears. He stared at the demonic blade and licked his lips. He was attracted on the spot. Although Hipster wasn't a person in the cultivation world, he could tell that it should be a weapon. He couldn't help but roll his eyes at Yan Juexing. He smiled through his tears and said coquettishly, Is there such a thing for a child to play with? Aren't you afraid of hurting him? Yan Juexing saw that his son liked it and had stopped crying. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He waved his hand and said, It's okay. If I don't let it hurt people, it won't hurt people. Little Yan Yun, who was crying so hard just now, immediately forgot what sadness was. After all, he had the temperament of a child. He slid down from his mother's arms. The tears on his face had yet to dry, but he bit a finger. He raised his head and looked at the demonic blade floating in the air. He seemed to be wondering how it flew. Yan Juexing's eyes lit up. He immediately controlled the demonic blade to fly around the house. As expected, it attracted little Yan Yun to clap and cheer. Not to mention little Yan Yun, even Hipster was seeing such a magical thing for the first time. His eyes were full of splendor. He didn't know how the demon god would feel if he knew this scene. The divine weapon he had personally refined had become a toy for a child to play with. Not long after, little Yan Yun completely let go and chased the demonic blade around the house. However, the physical strength of a child was limited. After a long time, he naturally became tired. In the end, he hugged the demonic blade and fell asleep. Under Hipster's guidance, Yan Juexing placed him on a small bed and gently covered him with a blanket. At this moment, the pair of husband and wife looked at each other seriously. After a moment of embarrassment, Hipster asked with concern, Why is your face so ugly? Yan Juexing shook his head and said, You've suffered all these years. These words made Hipster cry again. He choked and said, It's okay for me to suffer. I'm just afraid that the child will not have a father in the future. With such an appearance, no one would have thought that this was the unruly princess who disguised herself as a man and ran amok in the capital. Yan Juexing tilted his head to look at little Yan Yun who was sleeping soundly. A trace of fear flashed in his eyes. If he hadn't escaped quickly, he would probably have lost his father. He gently let out a breath and hugged Hipster in his arms to comfort her. Then, he whispered something in Hipster's ear. Suddenly, he carried Hipster in his arms and walked towards the brocade couch, causing Hipster to exclaim shyly. The clothes of the man and woman on the bed fluttered in the wind. Not long after, two naked bodies were entangled together. Waves of panting and moaning were enveloped by the soundproof barrier. This time, Yan Juexing did his best to serve Hipster, somewhat like making up for it. After making love, the two of them hugged each other and talked about everything. Yan Juexing told Hipster in detail about his background and what he had experienced all these years. He didn't hide anything, including how he suffered a few losses at the hands of Yu Qianqiu. Hipster was just a mortal. It was the first time she had heard of the exciting and bizarre stories of the cultivation world. She was even more impressed by Yu Qianqiu, who had repeatedly tried to kill Yan Juexing. Chapter 970. On the 22nd floor of the World Chamber of Commerce, Wei Chuanqiu left the room he had been guarding and walked slowly to the other side of the passage with a puzzled look. There was no other reason. Yu Qianqiu suddenly brought 5 women here and arranged for them to stay on the 22nd floor. Obviously, they had a special relationship with Yu Qianqiu. However, after Yu Qianqiu brought these women here, he ran away. He couldn't find them even if he wanted to solve his doubts. After some deliberation, he decided to personally investigate the matter. He had to figure out what was going on. Since his adopted daughter, Bai Suzhen, was Yu Qianqiu's woman, then what was going on with these 5 women? Nongzhu had just arranged rooms for the 5 women and went back and forth between the 5 rooms to ask how satisfied they were. As soon as he went out, he saw Wei Chuanqiu walking slowly toward him with a gloomy face and 2 big sleeves. Looking at his face, Nongzhu's heart could not help but pound. There were 25 single rooms on this floor. To avoid him, he had specially arranged these women to stay on this side. There shouldn't be any conflict with him, right? Bat King Wei. Nongzhu bowed respectfully to Wei Chuanqiu. Wei Chuanqiu looked him up and down and snorted. You're just a gigolo. I can tell at first glance that you're not a good person. He was not polite to Nongzhu at all and directly scolded him. What did he say? Nongzhu's face twitched, but she did not dare to refute him. His cultivation was much higher than hers, and she was no match for him if they fought. She could only force a smile. Are these 5 women your people or Yu Qianqiu's people? Wei Chuanqiu twirled his mustache and asked with squinted eyes. His eyes seemed to regard Nongzhu as a pimp in a brothel. Nongzhu was also a smart person. Seeing Wei Chuanqiu's attitude, he naturally would not take trouble for himself. He immediately pushed the blame away and said, they are all sect leader Yu's people. As soon as he said this, Wei Chuanqiu's face suddenly darkened. He stared coldly at Nongzhu and said in a low voice, call them out. I have something to ask them. Nongzhu felt that something was wrong and said awkwardly, Bat King, why don't you wait for sect leader Yu to come back and ask him yourself? Wei Chuanqiu snorted with a threatening tone and stared at Nongzhu with a fierce look. Nongzhu felt her scalp go numb and obediently knocked on the door one after another. Not long after, 5 different women came out obediently. They lined up in a row and stood in front of Wei Chuanqiu, trembling with fear. When Nongzhu called them out, she had already secretly transmitted a message to the 5 of them. This green-winged Bat King was an early-stage Immortal Emperor expert and had a bad temper. She told everyone to be careful. Wei Chuanqiu's cold gaze swept across the faces of the 5 women. Noticing that all of them were rather good-looking, she snorted coldly and said, tell me honestly, what is the relationship between you and Yu Qianqiu? She then pointed to the first woman standing on the right and said, we'll start from you. You speak first. At first, Furong was a little flustered because of Nongzhu's warning. However, she thought that since Yu Qianqiu could bring her here, he would definitely not harm her. Because of her almost blind trust in Yu Qianqiu, Furong became the calmest among the 5 women. She indifferently bowed to Wei Chuanqiu and said, Furong greets Senior Wei. Yu Qianqiu is my man. Hearing this, Wei Chuanqiu's mustache trembled. He stared at the calm Furong for a long time before slowly moving his eyes to the next woman, Wu Lixue. Wu Lixue was a little afraid at first, but after hearing Furong's words, she threw all her fears to the back of her mind. She bit her lips and stared at Furong without moving her eyes. Sure enough, her guess was confirmed. Yu Qianqiu did not only have one woman. Little girl, how dare you not answer this old man's question? Are you tired of living? Wei Chuanqiu said in a gloomy voice. Yan Yu, who was standing behind Wu Lixue, immediately sent a telepathic message to remind her and secretly pulled Wu Lixue. Wu Lixue's eyes were filled with tears. She replied with an aggrieved expression, I am Yu Qianqiu's woman. Wei Chuanqiu suddenly sneered. When his eyes moved to Yan Yu slightly bowed and said, Me too. Nongzhu, who was standing aside, thought that these were the only 3 women. Because he had investigated Yu Qianqiu's background, he knew that the Temptress of 100 Charms next was the former lover of Yu Qianqiu's master in Kuangsang. The reason why Yu Qianqiu brought her along was that he respected her as his master's wife. However, to his astonishment, the Temptress of 100 Charms followed closely behind Yan Yu and said shamelessly, Senior, Yu Qianqiu is my man. I am Yu Qianqiu's woman. Hearing this, Wei Chuanqiu and the other women didn't have much reaction. Unexpectedly, Nongzhu suddenly shouted angrily, Temptress of 100 Charms, don't make irresponsible remarks. There are deities above us. How dare you be so shameless and talk nonsense? Do you want to die? No one expected that Nongzhu would be so angry. They all looked at her in astonishment. The hostility on Wei Chuanqiu's face disappeared. After a while, he pointed at the Temptress of 100 Charms and asked Nongzhu, Is there any secret? Senior, you are wise. Nongzhu made an obeisance and pointed at the Temptress of 100 Charms who was biting her lips angrily. She said, This woman is the woman of Yu Qianqiu's former master. To be exact, she should be the wife of Yu Qianqiu's master. It's one thing for her to be shameless, but how dare she ruin Yu Qianqiu's reputation as well? Master's wife. The other women, including Wei Chuanqiu, exclaimed together. Furong, Wu Lixue, Yan Yu, and Zi all looked at the Temptress of 100 Charms in disbelief. Even Yan Yu, who had spent the longest time with the Temptress of 100 Charms, did not know that the Temptress of 100 Charms was Yu Qianqiu's master's wife. If she had known, she would not have encouraged the Temptress of 100 Charms to threaten Yu Qianqiu in the purple bamboo forest in the South China Sea, because it was against human nature. No matter how open-minded Yan Yu was, it was still a little difficult for her to get through this. The seductive look on the Temptress of 100 Charms' face was completely gone. Her smooth cheeks turned pale and blood appeared on her tightly bitten lips. Obviously, she had bitten her lips. She slowly raised her head and looked at Nongzhu firmly. She said, Yu Qianqiu is my man. I am Yu Qianqiu's woman. Bitch. How dare you talk nonsense? Nongzhu flew into a rage and slapped the Temptress of 100 Charms' face. Pa! The slap made the Temptress of 100 Charms fall to the ground. Although the slap was not lethal, Wei Chuanqiu was inexplicably frightened. She looked at Nongzhu speechlessly and found that the toy boy was really cruel. He did not show any mercy when hitting a woman. Yu Qianqiu's master's wife said that she was Yu Qianqiu's woman. The other women were also shocked. They did not expect that such a thing would happen. They did not know what to do for a moment. The Temptress of 100 Charms, who was lying on her side on the ground, coughed slightly. Immediately, a pool of blood came out of her mouth and fell on the white floor. It could be seen that Nongzhu's slap was not light. The Temptress of 100 Charms lay on her side on the ground. She looked at the blood flowing from the corner of her mouth and remained motionless. Zi could not stand it anymore. She looked at her master resentfully and squatted down to help the Temptress of 100 Charms. Yan Yu also came to herself and followed Zi to help the Temptress of 100 Charms. Stop. Don't blame me for being rude to anyone who dares to help her. Nongzhu pointed at Zi and Yan Yu angrily. The two women looked at each other and squatted down. They did not know whether to help the Temptress of 100 Charms or not. Zi thought for a while and immediately showed the most lethal look to her master. She begged, Master. However, this time, Nongju directly ignored her. She pointed at Ze and shouted, "Shut up." Ze did not dare to speak at once. "I am an upright person. I don't need anyone's pity." The Temptress of 100 Charms sat up. She pushed Ze and Yen Yu's hands away and stood up stubbornly. With blood at the corner of her mouth, she looked at Nongju and said, "What did I do wrong? Why did you hit me?" Slap. Nongju slapped the Temptress of 100 Charms again and shouted angrily, "Shameless bitch. How dare you talk back to me?" This time, the strength of the slap was obviously stronger. The Temptress of 100 Charms' hair was messed up. She fell to the ground with blood flowing from the corner of her mouth. Wei Chuanxiu, who originally wanted to come over and denounce Nongju, was dumbfounded and stood aside obediently. It seemed that he wanted to show that this matter had nothing to do with him. He looked at Nongju with a strange look as if he was saying, "Brother, you are so cruel. Are you sure that this woman has nothing to do with Yu Qianqiu? Be careful that Yu Qianqiu comes back to get even with you." The Temptress of 100 Charms only lay on the ground for a while. Then she stood up stubbornly again. She tore a piece of cloth from her sleeve and tied her messy hair behind her head. The blood at the corner of her mouth and her red and swollen cheeks could not hide the firmness in her eyes. The firmness that she would never regret. "Senior Wei, is there anything else? If not, I will go back to my room to have a rest." The Temptress of 100 Charms directly passed Nongju and said to Wei Chuanxiu, as if Nongju had never hit her. Wei Chuanxiu looked at Nongju and then at the Temptress of 100 Charms. He didn't know what to say. In fact, he was the culprit. If he hadn't come here to interrogate Nongju, such a thing would not have happened. "You are really a shameless bitch. I will kill you today in case you become a laughing stock." Nongju snorted coldly. She moved as fast as lightning and directly grabbed the neck of the Temptress of 100 Charms. With the cultivation of the Temptress of 100 Charms, how could she escape from Nongju? At this critical moment, Wei Chuanxiu suddenly moved and clamped Nongju's arm. He looked at Nongju helplessly and said, "What are you doing? I haven't finished my question and you want to kill me? You are looking down on me." He waved his hand and Nongju immediately retreated far away. "Girl, this gigolo said that you are Yu Qianqiu's wife, and you said that you are Yu Qianqiu's woman. What is going on? Why can't I do it?" Wei Chuanxiu frowned and said. One of the reasons why he saved the Temptress of 100 Charms was that he was curious. The most important thing was that he didn't know what Yu Qianqiu's attitude was. If he accidentally killed Yu Qianqiu's sweetheart because of him, who knew what crazy things that bad guy would do? Chapter 971. Wei Chuanxiu had interacted with Yu Qianqiu for a long time. After interacting with him for such a long time, he could tell that Yu Qianqiu was vicious and merciless. He could also do shameless flattery. However, no matter how much he changed, he could not change the insanity in his bones. It was like a kind of madness against the oppression of fate. Whoever touched his things would be oppressed and attacked by him. He had to resist fiercely. Wei Chuanxiu did not dare to go too far when his inner elixir was in Yu Qianqiu's hand. That was why he saved the enchantress from Nongju. "There was a man who gave me up. We had no relationship. Later, that man took a disciple and died soon after. In order to avenge that man, I got to know his disciple. Maybe I fell in love with him after a long time. I don't deny that I fell in love with his disciple. It's that simple." The enchantress smiled faintly with blood on the corner of her mouth. No one knew whether she was laughing at Wei Chuanxiu or herself. She just looked at Nongju, who was pushed back by Wei Chuanxiu, and said, "I don't understand why I have to be the woman of an irresponsible man who abandoned me and died a long time ago. I'm not a woman who likes the new and gets tired of the old. I've done a lot for that man and almost destroyed my whole sect. Of course, this is the reason I found to comfort myself later. After I fell in love with Yu Qianqiu, I was also very conflicted. But why did he make me his wife? Now I just want to be his woman." Then she looked around and said, I know what I did was wrong, but I don't know what I did wrong. Who can tell me a reason to persuade me so that I won't continue to do wrong? Furong and the other girls looked at each other. Anyway, in their understanding, it must be wrong. There was no need for any reason. Anyway, it was wrong. This kind of thing should not happen. However, these girls sympathized with her now, so no one could say anything. Well. Wei Chuanxiu scratched his head and looked at Nongzhu. He immediately waved to him and said, "Toy boy, come here and tell her what she did wrong." Nongzhu walked over slowly and snorted, "Bitch. The reason is very simple. I've already said that what you're doing is against common sense." "Yes." Wei Chuanxiu nodded and said, "Doing so is against common sense. Little girl. Let go. Don't be stubborn anymore. If you continue like this, the world will not tolerate you. In the end, you'll only be the one getting hurt, and you might even drag Yu Qianqiu down with you. Besides, Yu Qianqiu wasn't a good person. Why did he have to like him? And you guys." Wei Chuanxiu then pointed at the rest of the girls and glared at them. "I say, you can like anyone, but why do you all want to board Yu Qianqiu's pirate ship? Is that broken ship that attractive to you? I think all of you should disperse. Disperse, disperse, everyone go home." He had a good idea. He was going to disband all the women of Yu Qianqiu and let his adopted daughter, Bai Suzhen, be the only one. Otherwise, he would not feel good if Bai Suzhen shared a man with other women. However, Ze curled her lips and said, "I won't go. I'm not his woman. I'm just his friend." She thought, "I want to board the pirate ship, but the pirate ship is so sneaky that it doesn't give me a chance to do so." Of course, she could only think about it in her heart. She couldn't say it out loud, or she would die of shame. She didn't have the courage of the enchantress. To be honest, she quite admired the enchantress. Nongzhu glanced at Ze and twitched his mouth. No one knew his daughter better than him. He probably guessed what his daughter was thinking. Against common sense? The enchantress suddenly giggled and asked, "Mr. Nongzhu, how am I against common sense? Is it because I dated his master?" "Yes." Nongzhu suddenly turned around and shouted, "Bitch. The world is so big. I don't care who you find, but not Yu Qianqiu. Mr. Nongzhu, you can't convince me with this reason." The enchantress shook her head stubbornly. Nongzhu immediately shouted, "Then I'll kill you and end all troubles." "Mr. Nongzhu, you don't have to do it. If Yu Qianqiu wants me dead, he only needs to say one word, and I'll die in front of him immediately." The enchantress smiled faintly. She had long thought that there would be resistance when she was with Yu Qianqiu, but she just thought it was because of the common people's opinions and filthy words. However, she didn't care about those things at all. Since she could be called the Enchantress of 100 Charms by others, what kind of ugly words had she not heard before? However, she didn't expect that there would be resistance from Yu Qianqiu, which was so strong that it hurt her both physically and mentally. Nongzhu suddenly squinted her eyes and asked word by word, "Did you two do something out of line?" "No, it's just my wishful thinking," the enchantress said fearlessly. The others looked at them in silence, especially Wei Chuanxiu. He couldn't figure out why this gigolo cared so much about this matter. It seemed that he cared about it very much, and his attitude was quite extreme. "Enchantress, since you and I are from the same place, I'll give you a choice." Nongzhu waved her hand and pointed outside. "You can either leave the World Chamber of Commerce and go wherever you want, or you can die in my hands. It's up to you. My patience is limited. You'd better make a decision quickly." "I won't go anywhere. I'll wait here for Yu Qianqiu to come back. I'll only listen to him, and I won't listen to anyone else." The enchantress slowly turned around and walked straight to her room, as if she didn't care about Nongzhu's threat at all. "Bitch. I think you're tired of living." Nongzhu shouted angrily and dashed forward. However, a green shadow flashed by and was caught by Wei Chuanxiu. Wei Chuanxiu grabbed her with one hand and scratched his head with the other. Let's wait for Yu Qianqiu to come back. What do you want to say when I come back? The door in front of them opened and Yu Qianqiu walked out. He was stunned when he saw them in the corridor. Then, he strode over and asked suspiciously, "What are you doing?" Nongzhu pointed at the enchantress and shouted angrily, "Ask her." Yu Qianqiu looked over and saw the enchantress standing at the door, motionless with her back facing the outside. Her messy hair was tied up casually with a rag and her clothes were a little messy. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help frowning and asked, "What's wrong with you?" The enchantress didn't want Yu Qianqiu to see her embarrassed appearance. However, after hesitating for a while, she knew that she couldn't avoid what she had to face. So, she slowly turned around and said as if nothing had happened, "Nothing." However, the two palm marks on her face and the blood at the corner of her mouth made Yu Qianqiu squint and ask coldly, "Who did this?" The enchantress shook her head to show that she was fine and hoped to make peace. However, Nongzhu flashed over, pointed at her and scolded, "This bitch is shameless. How dare she say that she is your woman? I think it's better to drive her out as soon as possible so that she won't be hated by everyone." Hearing this, the enchantress immediately looked at Yu Qianqiu. The others also looked at Yu Qianqiu and wanted to know his reaction. Yu Qianqiu looked at Nongzhu expressionlessly and asked, "Did you hit her?" "I taught her a lesson for you. If Bat King Wei didn't stop me, I would have killed her." Nongzhu was still angry and said. Yu Qianqiu's expression changed unpredictably. Hui Ming was dark and gloomy for a while before he sighed and said, "We are all on the same side. What can't we talk about? Why did you hit her?" "What? She said that you are her man. Shouldn't I teach her a lesson?" Nongzhu said harshly, "Are you out of your mind? It's against common sense. Your reputation will be ruined if it is spread out." Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and shook his head. He sighed slowly and said, "Anyway, you shouldn't have hit her." The enchantress, who had always been seductive and confident, quietly turned her head to one side after hearing this. In fact, there were tears in her eyes. She really didn't ask for much. "From what you said, is there really something going on between you two?" Nongzhu said aggressively, "Is it really as she said, that you are her man and she is your woman? Have you already done something out of line?" "Nothing happened between us." Yu Qianqiu stared at Nongzhu fiercely and said, "But I won't allow anyone to hurt her, especially her. You'd better control your emotions. It's none of your business and it won't affect you. I don't want to see you do anything to her. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." He clenched his fists tightly in his sleeves. Obviously, he was trying hard to control himself. "Humph. Looks like I was the one who meddled in other people's business." Nongzhu was so angry that she laughed and said, "I only ask you one question. Tell me honestly, is she your woman?" Everyone's gaze was focused on Yu Qianqiu, waiting to see what he would say. Yu Qianqiu's Adam's apple moved and his mouth was dry. He turned his head to look at the enchantress, who was also looking at him, and said word by word, "She is not my woman." Then he suddenly looked at Nongzhu and said, "Are you satisfied now?" Some things were just too powerful. Even if Yu Qianqiu was extremely daring, he still didn't dare to rashly cross them. The enchantress's body stiffened. She bit her lips hard, and fresh blood came out from the corner of her mouth. Ever since she made up her mind in the bamboo house, she knew what kind of price she would have to pay. Perhaps it would be a heavy price that she could not bear. Even though she was mentally prepared, she still felt a heart-wrenching pain in her chest when she heard Yu Qianqiu's words. Nongzhu glanced at them and sneered, "Yu Qianqiu, you should have a bottom line. Some things should never be crossed. Otherwise, you will be infamous for thousands of years. That's all I have to say. I hope you remember what you said just now." After saying that, she walked straight to the corridor and disappeared at the top of the stairs, leaving a cold snort. Wei Chuanqiu coughed twice and said nothing. As the culprit, he also quietly floated back to where he was supposed to be. Yu Qianqiu only felt that his chest was as heavy as lead, and it was hard for him to breathe. He looked at the enchantress and asked, "Are you all right?" The enchantress forced a smile and shook her head. Her strong confidence in facing men was nowhere to be seen. Biting her lips, she opened the door of the room and quickly closed the door after entering. Yu Qianqiu heaved a heavy sigh and said to Yan Yu, "Go and accompany her." Yan Yu nodded and quickly entered the room of the enchantress. Chapter 972. Furong, Wu Lixue, and Zi stood quietly at the side. What happened just now was really emotional for the three of them. From what the three of them knew, the Allure Beauty's actions were wrong. However, the three of them inexplicably felt that Yu Qianqiu's words, "She's not my woman," were too cruel to the Allure Beauty. The three of them stared at the silent Yu Qianqiu, but their ears were paying attention to the movements in the temptress's room. However, they couldn't hear a sound at all. Obviously, she had set up a soundproof enchantment. The three of them were all women, so they could imagine how sad the temptress must be at this time. Maybe she was crying heartbreakingly. Originally, Wu Lixue was the one who was the most troubled and couldn't understand this matter. It was hard for her to accept the fact that so many women ran out of Yu Qianqiu for no reason. However, after witnessing all this, she realized that she was lucky. Moreover, in this world, it was very common for men to have 3 or 4 wives. She even sympathized with the temptress. She couldn't imagine what she would be like if one day Yu Qianqiu said that she wasn't his woman. She was afraid that she would collapse. The other women's thoughts were similar to her. Furong gently walked to Yu Qianqiu's side, held his arm, and said softly, "Go in and see her." However, Yu Qianqiu didn't answer the question and smiled bitterly. "I quite admire Yang Gua now, or should I say admire Master Jean." Yang Gua? Master Jean? The women were suddenly confused. They had never heard of these two names, but they were guessing which two masters in the immortal world were. Zi even asked foolishly, "I heard from my master that the immortal emperor in the immortal world is called Jean Tai. Is the Master Jean you mentioned him?" Yu Qianqiu immediately rolled his eyes and ignored her. How could he tell them the story of the master and disciple's incestuous relationship? If he told them, wouldn't it make them think of his inner thoughts? He patted the back of Furong's hand and said, "She needs your tolerance more. Otherwise, she will feel even worse if she stays with you every day. Can you understand me?" "I understand." Furong nodded and let go of his hand. She walked straight to the door of the Enchantress of 100 Charms and pushed the door open. After seeing her off, Yu Qianqiu slowly turned to look at Wu Lixue and asked, "Will you hate me?" He was worried that Wu Lixue wouldn't be able to accept the fact that he had too many women. A trace of grievance flashed across Wu Lixue's face, but he still shook his head. He walked to Yu Qianqiu's side and said in a low voice, "Can you help me save little Phoenix sister?" When Yu Qianqiu heard that, he suddenly felt a headache coming on. Although she was shaking her head to show that she wouldn't, it felt like she was saying, "If you can't save Sister Phoenix, I won't forgive you." But how was he supposed to save a crow that had been dead for so long? If he was seriously injured, he could still think of a way, but in fact, he was already dead. However, he couldn't refuse her. Seeing that he was speechless, Wu Lixue thought that he had agreed. She immediately took out the dead crow from her storage pouch and brought it to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He didn't know whether to take it or not, and his expression kept twitching. He now deeply understood that it wasn't a good thing to have too many women. Troublesome matters came one after another, and he still missed his single life. Isn't this the crow?" Zi curiously stretched her head over and grabbed the crow in Wu Lixue's hand. After confirming that it was indeed dead, she immediately avoided it with a contemptuous, and directly stuffed it into Yu Qianqiu's arms. Looking at Wu Lixue, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Are you sure? How can something that's already dead be saved?" As she said that, she looked at Yu Qianqiu and suddenly realized, "I know, you're deliberately making things difficult for him. And that's how it should be." She seemed to be taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. "It's not a crow, it's a phoenix. Before it died, it said that Yu Qianqiu had a way to save it. When Wu Lixue remembered that the crow had been killed to save her, a look of sorrow immediately appeared on her face. Zi looked at the crow in Yu Qianqiu's hand in disbelief. You said that it can speak? Yu Qianqiu waved his hand at Zi, signaling her to shut up. Holding the crow's leg, he asked suspiciously, Shui, did it really say that I could save it? When he remembered that this crow was the famous phoenix from his previous life, he started to believe it a little. If the number one divine bird in the world could be killed so easily, then it wouldn't be called a divine bird. Even he didn't believe it. Wu Lixue nodded with certainty. Before little sister Phoenix died, she desperately told me to find a way to find you. She said that you could save it. I can save it? Yu Qianqiu held the crow's leg in one hand and swayed it in front of him. He rubbed his chin and muttered. After thinking for a while, he raised his eyebrows and said, let's go and give it a try. After saying that, he walked towards a room with the crow's leg. Wu Lixue followed closely behind him. Zi naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity to watch the show. She followed behind the two of them happily. In the room, the crow's corpse was thrown on a table. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin and walked around the table twice. Zi also followed behind him like a conman. Wu Lixue looked at Yu Qianqiu expectantly. Could it be that it's not completely dead? Yu Qianqiu suddenly stopped and subconsciously asked Zi who was behind him. Zi looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot. She seemed to be saying, it's already dead, and you still say that it's not completely dead? Forget it. It's useless to tell you. You don't understand modern medicine. Yu Qianqiu said. Then, he turned the dead crow over so that its belly was facing the sky. He pressed 2 fingers on the crow's chest and kept pressing. The 2 girls looked at each other. Zi suddenly asked Wu Lixue, Shui, your little sister Phoenix is a female? Wu Lixue nodded. Zi immediately looked at Yu Qianqiu with disgust and said with disdain, it seems that not only are you a big liar, you're also a big pervert. You even took advantage of a female crow. Damn it. Don't talk nonsense if you don't understand. Yu Qianqiu said with disdain. After pressing the crow's nipples for a while, he bent over and opened the crow's mouth. He blew hard into the crow's mouth. This idiot was doing artificial respiration like in his previous life. How could he think of this? Zi and Wu Lixue looked at him curiously with their mouths open. They had never seen such a treatment method before. They were quite doubtful whether it would work. However, the result was just as the 2 girls expected. After a while, Yu Qianqiu realized that the crow was still dead. He finally gave up and stood at the side, shaking his head and sighing. Wu Lixue leaned over and said with a sad face, Yu Qianqiu, you must think of a way to save my little sister Phoenix. I really can't think of any way to save it, but there's a way that we can try. I'm just afraid that if we fail, your little sister Phoenix's corpse won't even be found. I'm afraid that you'll blame me then. Yu Qianqiu said with a toothache. What is it? Wu Lixue asked worriedly. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, do you still remember the phoenix's nirvana that I told you about at your house? Legend has it that the phoenix is an immortal bird. Every time it dies, it can be reborn. I just don't know if it's true or not. But didn't the crow say that it can be reborn after going through a tribulation? I think it should be true. But I'm still a little worried. If it can't be reborn after going through the tribulation, even if it doesn't turn into ashes, it will become a roasted crow. Ah. You can burn it back to life with fire? Is that true? Is this crow so magical? It's not a crow, but a phoenix. Zi looked as if she had heard a ridiculous story. She couldn't help but reach out to fiddle with the dead crow on the table. Wu Lixue frowned slightly. She remembered that the crow seemed to have said something about rebirth. She intertwined her fingers together and asked, should we try? Yu Qianqiu immediately shook his head and said, it's yours, and you have to decide. What if you burn it down? Wouldn't that make you sad? That's the reason why I haven't done anything yet. I'll listen to you. Shui, since we can't think of any other way, just let him burn it. Ze persuaded Wu Lishua energetically. After all, it wasn't hers, so she was very decisive. Wu Lishua hesitated for a moment, then nodded weakly at Yu Qianqiu, agreeing. In any case, no matter if it was a crow or a phoenix, Yu Qianqiu didn't have a good impression of these dead birds that still tormented people. If they were burned down, so be it. After getting Wu Lishua's agreement, he didn't say anything else and directly grabbed the crow in his palm. A ball of red flames instantly surged out, enveloping the crow and burning it. As soon as the flames appeared, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He immediately felt that the dead crow's body was rapidly absorbing the heat from the flames. Wu Lishua and Ze looked at each other. They both saw the clues. A normal bird's feather would most likely turn into ashes upon contact with a raging fire. However, this crow's feather was not damaged at all in the raging fire. This was clearly illogical. Wu Lishua's eyes immediately lit up, feeling a glimmer of hope. TSK. There really is a way. Yu Qianqiu was amazed. He guessed that there really was such a thing as a phoenix undergoing nirvana. The heat released by the ordinary flames in his palm was actually not enough for the bird to absorb. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand towards the window, and a gust of wind swept out. The curtains on the window immediately rolled down, and the red flames immediately shone in the room. Just as the curtains were rolled down, the red flames retracted, and the green flames continued to burn the motionless crow in his palm. After the time it took to eat a meal, the crow still did not move. Yu Qianqiu simply couldn't believe it. Even with the huge amount of heat contained in the green flames, there was still no reaction from the crow. He really didn't know how long it would take for it to absorb. Then let's try the purple flames. Yu Qianqiu's eyebrows twitched and the green flames retracted, while the purple flames rose up and enveloped the crow. The beautiful scene of the three-colored flames immediately caused Ze and Wu Lishua's hearts to flutter. And after the purple flames appeared, in just a few breaths' time, Yu Qianqiu immediately felt that the crow in his palm seemed to have a reaction. Chapter 973. In just a short while, the majestic and powerful energy of the purple flames seemed to have saturated the crow's body, and the speed at which the crow was absorbing the energy was gradually slowing down. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The power of the purple flames was indeed far greater than the blue flames, and if he used the blue flames to supply the crow to absorb, he was afraid that it would not be satisfied in a short period of time. Because of this, Yu Qianqiu began to ponder. He reckoned that the legendary phoenix's nirvana was actually the dead phoenix absorbing the energy within the flames, and when the energy was saturated, it should be able to be reborn. It was probably similar to charging the phoenix, and thinking about it, using fire to burn the phoenix was most likely the same. It really was an advanced divine bird, and had already reached the level of high technology in his previous world. At this moment, Wu Lishua and Ze both let out a surprised sound. They saw that the sleeping crow in Yu Qianqiu's palm had begun to emit a faint rainbow halo, flickering in and out of existence, and in an instant it was beautiful. Following that, a refreshing fragrance wafted over, and the flickering rainbow halo no longer flickered, but gradually condensed into a lingering rainbow cloud that circled around the sleeping crow in Yu Qianqiu's palm. The rainbow cloud's orbit was like a moving nebula in the universe, and it was mesmerizing, causing the three of them to feel relaxed and happy. As for the sleeping crow in the purple flames, it was as if it was sleeping sweetly in an ancient nebula. Its originally stiff legs were now gently retracting under its abdomen, and its stiff head had also returned to its shoulder feathers. Unknowingly, it had gone from lying on its side to nesting in Yu Qianqiu's palm, like a tired bird returning to its nest, sleeping under the starry sky, its demeanor unusually peaceful. Just as the fragrance was getting stronger and stronger, the heart-warming fragrance was suddenly sucked away from their nostrils. The three of them subconsciously stretched out their heads to chase after it and took a deep breath. However, the fragrance was so resolute that it did not leave even the slightest trace behind. The air in front of them instantly became light and tasteless, completely returning to normal. The seven-colored cloud that had gradually spread out to cover half of the space in the room was also gradually shrinking. In the end, It was the size of a dinosaur egg, forming a 7-colored eggshell. The gorgeous flowing light was so beautiful that people didn't dare to breathe. After the rainbow-colored eggshell was formed, it completely blocked the vision of the three of them, and they could no longer see the sleeping crow inside. At the same time, the rainbow-colored eggshell also completely blocked the absorption of the purple flames. Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief, feeling that his mission should be completed, and he quickly retracted the purple flames back into his body. In an instant, the purple light in the room disappeared, and Yu Qianqiu held the rainbow-colored eggshell with one hand, illuminating the entire room in a strange and dazzling light, as if they were in a dream. Wu Lixue and Zi were even more dumbfounded, their mouths wide open as they looked left and right. So beautiful, so beautiful. Just as the three of them were immersed in this dream, the light in the room suddenly changed, and they could only see the rainbow-colored light on the eggshell moving quickly, suddenly colliding with each other, and exploding with a dazzling light, so bright that the three of them closed their eyes, not daring to look straight at it. But in the instant that the three of them closed their eyes, the dazzling light suddenly retracted, and the three of them immediately felt the room turn dark. Keng keng. A loud cry reverberated in the room, causing the three of them to open their eyes at the same time, only to see a strange-looking bird standing on Yu Qianqiu's palm. To be exact, it should be a chicken, with a chicken head, a chicken tail, and a chicken body. The only difference was that there were 3 rainbow-colored feathers on its head, and the color of its body was yellow and gray. Calling it a chicken didn't seem like it. Pheasant. Yu Qianqiu cried out involuntarily, and then he was dumbfounded. He couldn't help but wonder if it was because he often roasted pheasants, and in the end, turned the crow into the appearance of a pheasant. That would be a sin, but he didn't seem to have thought about roasting a pheasant just now, right? Pheasant. After being reminded by Yu Qianqiu, Wu Lixue and Zi also cried out involuntarily. If this wasn't a pheasant, then what was it? Both of them had seen pheasants before, especially Zi. In order to practice the fowl show, she asked Nongzhu to catch many pheasants for her to observe. Although most of them were eaten by Nongzhu in the end, it didn't stop her from recognizing pheasants. Just as the pheasant let out a loud keng keng sound, Wei Chuanxiu, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly trembled. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the other side of the corridor. Yun Peng, who was standing on the rooftop, also trembled and quickly disappeared. In the blink of an eye, he appeared beside Wei Chuanxiu, and said with a serious expression, "Did you hear what just now?" Wei Chuanxiu slowly stood up and looked at Yun Peng. Yun Peng had heard it from outside, so he naturally heard it even more clearly from here. This sound wasn't loud, but when it entered their ears, it actually made their bodies weak and made them want to worship it. This was the first time they had such a feeling, and it was really too strange. It seems to be the cry of something. Wei Chuanxiu looked at Yun Peng in bewilderment. She asked herself in her heart, what kind of cry could make her heart tremble? What kind of cry? Yun Peng's white sword-like eyebrows knitted together, and he slowly muttered to himself, what kind of thing can make the cry of gold and jade? Many years ago, I heard from my late father that in ancient times, there was a divine beast phoenix that descended from the god realm to the immortal realm. The cry it made was like the resonance of gold and jade, sonorous and mellow. Could it be the cry of a phoenix? Phoenix? Are you kidding me? There must be something wrong with your brain. The divine beast phoenix is a supreme imperial family with the noblest bloodline among us birds. It doesn't drink unless it's morning dew, it doesn't eat unless it's tender bamboo, and it doesn't rest unless it's a 1,000-year-old Chinese parasol tree. Wei Chuanxiu looked like she had heard the funniest joke. She pointed around and said, "You can't be saying that a phoenix would run to the World Chamber of Commerce founded by Yu Qianqiu, right? Then isn't this phoenix a bit too blind? It really doesn't live up to its title of phoenix. I'm just saying." Yun Peng changed his mind and said, "But this cry is indeed a bit strange. It's a phoenix, I'll chop off its head and give it to you." Wei Chuanxiu snorted and looked to the other side, saying, "It must be Yu Qianqiu doing something again. Let's go take a look." The two of them then dashed over in a flash. Inside the room, the pheasant standing on Yu Qianqiu's palm suddenly opened its eyes. A seven-colored glow flashed in its sharp eyes, and it was even more spirited than a big rooster. Yu Qianqiu said in astonishment, "Crow, is that you? How did you turn into a pheasant?" "You're the one who turned into a pheasant." "Ah!" The pheasant cried out in fear and flapped its wings to fly up. Its two claws were frantically clapping in the air. Yu Qianqiu's face instantly darkened. This wasn't the first time he saw this pheasant acting like it had stepped on dog poop. He had been humiliated like this in the Wu clan, but it was just a crow at that time. But this action undoubtedly proved that this pheasant in front of him was the crow of the past. "Ah! This pheasant can talk." Zi looked at Wu Lixue and said in astonishment, "Shue, this pheasant is that crow of yours?" "Shut up. I'm not a pheasant." The pheasant flapped its wings and arrived in front of Zi. It spoke in a clear and melodious voice, "I don't drink unless it's morning dew, I don't eat unless it's tender bamboo, and I don't perch unless it's a 1,000-year-old parasol tree. I am a phoenix." Wu Lixue had heard these words more than once in the Wu clan. Back then, in order to correct Wu Lixue's bad habit of calling herself a crow, Crow had repeatedly warned Wu Lixue about these words. Wu Lixue, who was at the side, immediately applauded and cheered, "Little sister Phoenix, you really came back to life. Big sister Shue, The pheasant was also pleasantly surprised. It seemed to have tears in its eyes as it landed on Wu Lixue's shoulder. It hugged Wu Lixue's neck and whimpered, "That evil person didn't hurt you, right?" "No." A beautiful woman and a pheasant gave off a strange feeling as if they had just escaped from death and met again. They were being overly sentimental. Zi immediately clicked her tongue and walked to Wu Lixue's side. She looked at the pheasant that could talk with curiosity. At this moment, the room's door was suddenly pushed open. Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng stood side by side at the door. Their gazes swept across the room and locked onto Wu Lixue's shoulder. They had heard the conversation clearly from outside. They actually heard someone claiming to be a phoenix. The two of them were shocked and immediately opened the door to verify the situation. However, when they saw the pheasant on Wu Lixue's shoulder, they were a little confused. After all, they had never seen a phoenix before. They had only heard the legends of phoenixes. In the legends, phoenixes all had colorful feathers and were indescribably noble. How could it look like a pheasant? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. It was actually Yun Peng and Wei Chuanxiu. Seeing that the two of them were staring at the pheasant on Wu Lixue's shoulder, he immediately laughed and said, "It's really rare for two seniors to come together. I wonder what noble purpose do you have?" The two of them looked at each other. Wei Chuanxiu looked at the pheasant that was hugging Wu Lixue's neck and asked, "It's a phoenix?" Her tone was full of doubt. Yu Qianqiu was startled. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. He immediately said perfunctorily, "You heard it yawn like a toad. Do you think it looks like a phoenix? It's clearly a pheasant. You are the pheasant." When the pheasant heard someone insulting it, it immediately retracted its wings and jumped on Wu Lixue's shoulder. Its sharp eyes suddenly flashed with colorful light. It stared at Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng and said, "So it's a white-feathered great peng and a green bat. You actually dare to question this god's identity? How dare you?" Unexpectedly, Wu Lixue grabbed it and directly held it on his waist. He scolded, "Don't be rude to seniors." Then he nervously bowed to Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng and said, "Two seniors, please don't be offended. It is still young and ignorant. Shue, let me go. This god's bloodline is noble. I am a supreme royal among the birds. How can I bow to them?" The pheasant whimpered and struggled. However, it was tightly held by Wu Lixue. It couldn't use brute force to break free for fear of hurting Wu Lixue. However, it really felt that bowing to Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng would make the phoenix lose face. It almost cried. Chapter 974. Yu Qianqiu saw some clues from the increasingly shocked expressions of Yun Peng and Wei Chuanxiu. He knew that it was meaningless to continue perfunctorily, so he walked to Wu Lishue's side and casually slapped the pheasant's head. Then, he smilingly scolded, "So what if you're a phoenix? It's so big that even a bird can't compare. At most, it's a pheasant." This slap made the pheasant squeal. It struggled under Wu Lishue's arm. "Yu Qianqiu, you dare to hit this god." It shouted that it wanted to fight Yu Qianqiu to the death. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with this useless fella that could be easily killed by Yan Juixing. He stretched his hand towards the door and walked out with Yun Peng and Wei Chuanqiu. The three went up to the rooftop and set up a soundproof barrier. They stood side by side in front of the white jade railings. Yun Peng and Wei Chuanqiu stood on the left and right of Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu glanced around and looked into the distance. He wasn't in a hurry to speak. If they had any questions, they would ask him. The two early-stage Immortal Emperor experts were still shocked by the phoenix's roar. Although they didn't see the phoenix's sacred art with their own eyes, they were sure that the pheasant was a phoenix. The keng-keng sound they heard at first was the most powerful evidence. Secondly, it was rumored that after a phoenix hatched from its shell, it could speak the human language. This wasn't something that other beasts could compare with. It represented the extremely superior noble bloodline of a mythological beast. From the clear female voice it let out, it was clear that it was still a young phoenix. There was still a long way to go before it could become a truly majestic and noble phoenix. It still needed to grow. But even though it was still a young phoenix, the shock it brought to the two was indescribable. When the two came back to their senses, they felt their mouths were dry. Wei Chuanqiu slowly turned around and looked at Yu Qianqiu like he was a monster. Just now, this fella had casually slapped the phoenix like he was bullying a wimpy kid. For these winged fellows, there were probably not many who dared to do so. And that girl, she actually held the phoenix under her arm like she was holding a chicken. What was wrong with this world? Could it be that the phoenix had no place in their eyes? However, what Wei Chuanqiu couldn't figure out the most was that the phoenix was a divine beast that lived in the immortal realm. If it wanted to descend to the immortal realm, it should be a real adult phoenix. Why did a young phoenix appear, and why did it fall into this brat's hands? It was simply unimaginable. Yun Peng, who had also turned around, had the same thoughts. Yu Qianqiu, tell us honestly, where did you get this baby phoenix from? Wei Chuanqiu held it in for a long time before saying this. I just happened to pick it up. Yu Qianqiu shrugged disapprovingly. You happened to pick it up. Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng lost their voices at the same time. Yun Peng, who had always been calm, couldn't bear to listen any longer. His white sword-like eyebrows flew up as he coldly snorted, Yu Qianqiu, it seems like the two of us are nothing in your eyes. Do you think we're 3 years old? He just happened to pick up a phoenix. Then when did you happen to pick up a divine dragon for us to see? Yu Qianqiu looked at Yun Peng blankly and thought to himself, you really don't want to mess with this daddy. This daddy really did happen to meet a divine dragon, but the other party was a bit too scary, so it really wasn't easy to pick it up. If there's a chance, I'll take it out and let you have a good look. As long as you don't be afraid, it's fine. In any case, this daddy was scared shitless at that time and still doesn't dare to see it a second time. Looking at the two's expressions, he knew that if he didn't give a complete reason, he was afraid that they would be at odds with him. He shook his head, made a big circle with his hands, and said with a bitter smile, to be exact, at the beginning, I only picked up an egg. It was a very strange egg that could even glow, and it was about this big. Before, I didn't know that there was a phoenix inside. Even if it hatched, I didn't know that it was a phoenix. After all, I've never seen a phoenix before. It was that pheasant's mouth that was very cheap, and it kept chirping that it was some divine bird phoenix. That's what happened, there's nothing I can do if you don't believe me. In short, I really did pick it up. His words were half true and half false. It was impossible for him to reveal the things that happened in the human world, but his attitude could be considered sincere, and it didn't seem like he was faking it. Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng looked at each other. The latter sized up Yu Qianqiu with a slightly judgmental gaze, and said, even if it's a phoenix egg, I'm afraid that it can't be hatched just because you say so. Could it be that you know how to hatch a phoenix egg? His tone was full of doubt, and this was the biggest point that Yu Qianzhou's words gave the two the biggest doubt. You guys think too highly of me. Yu Qianzhou laughed, and embarrassedly rubbed his hands. At that time, I really thought that the egg looked too strange. In fact, I didn't think it was an egg at first, but when I saw that it was actually glowing, I wanted to open it to see if there was any treasure inside. But you guys don't know, that egg was really too hard. I tried everything I could, but I couldn't open it. In the end, I really had no other choice, so I thought of a method that wasn't really a method, and threw it into the fire. I just wanted to give it a try. Hee hee. Speaking of which, it was really a coincidence. No matter how much strength I used, I couldn't open it. In the end, when I burned it with fire, it really did burn, and that fellow jumped out from inside, claiming to be a divine bird phoenix. That's right. I still have that eggshell. Without hesitation, Yu Qianzhou immediately took out 2 pieces of the phoenix eggshell that he had collected, and handed them to the two. In order to win their trust, it could be said that he didn't hold anything back. This was also an action that couldn't be helped. After all, at the moment, these 2 fellows were the only gold medal fighters that he could bring out. The slightly protruding surface of the eggshell was pitch black, and the slightly concave inside carried a brilliant silver splendor. It was very beautiful. The two held the item in their hands and examined it slightly. Immediately, their expressions were filled with fear. The two of them felt an awe-inspiring majesty from the eggshell. Humans might not be able to discover anything, but to the two of them, they had the feeling of wanting to pry into the secrets of the royal family, only to be met with a severe warning. The majesty directly shocked the two of them. All of the doubts in the two's hearts immediately disappeared. They were completely sure that this was the phoenix eggshell, so what Yu Qianzhou said to them was naturally also true. To be able to reveal such a matter that shouldn't be spoken of lightly to others, the way the two looked at Yu Qianzhou quietly changed. Good stuff. Wei Chuanxiu looked at the eggshell in her hand in amazement. Then she looked at Yun Peng and said, Yun Peng, if I'm not wrong, this thing should be of great benefit to you. Yun Peng silently nodded, but still returned it to Yu Qianzhou's hand. Yun Peng, if I'm not wrong, this thing should be of great benefit to you. This was the first time Yu Qianzhou saw Yun Peng reveal a gaze filled with reluctance and desire towards something. He asked with some curiosity, Senior Yun, why don't you tell me what benefit this thing has to you? Yun Peng tried his best to shift his gaze away from the eggshell. He knew in his heart that if this eggshell was in the hands of someone else, he was afraid that he would go all out to snatch it, because this thing was too precious to him. However, he was still the man of Wei Chuanxiu's adopted daughter, so he couldn't bring himself to do such a thing. Seeing that he didn't want to say anything, Yu Qianzhou looked at Wei Chuanxiu suspiciously. Wei Chuanxiu looked at the eggshell in her hand thoughtfully for a while, then suddenly frowned and said, Phoenix egg. Phoenix egg. I seem to have heard of a legend a long time ago, but it's too long ago, I can't remember, but it seems. I remember. Wei Chuanxiu suddenly stared at Yun Peng and asked, could it be the legendary phoenix true blood? Yun Peng slowly turned his head, his eyes revealing a strange expression, and nodded vigorously. Wei Chuanxiu suddenly came to a realization, and said, I understand, I finally understand, this thing is indeed of great benefit to you. Phoenix true blood? Yu Qianzhou's heart itched when he heard this, and pulled on Wei Chuanxiu's big sleeve, and said, Bat King Wei, what is Phoenix true blood? Wei Chuanxiu looked at him, and seemed to be a little hesitant, as if considering whether to tell him or not. But looking at the eggshell in her hand, and then looking at Yun Peng, she finally organized her thoughts, and said in a deep voice, according to legend, the divine beasts of the god realm are the dragon and the phoenix, the beast sovereign, and the bird sovereign. To be able to become a sovereign, there is naturally something extraordinary that cannot be compared. According to legend, the phoenix will experience 9 tribulations, bathing in the flames of nirvana 9 times, and every time it successfully goes through a tribulation, its cultivation will become stronger. It can be said to be a kind of evolution in the midst of death, and it is very miraculous. However, phoenix true blood is not something that can be found in every phoenix. Only the blood of a phoenix that has experienced 9 tribulations is qualified to be called phoenix true blood, and only such a phoenix has the chance to give birth to a phoenix egg. Yu Qianqiu was startled, and looked at the eggshell in his hand, and said, then the connection between the two is very simple. Wei Chuanqiu said with a serious expression, phoenixes are born to experience 9 tribulations, and can be said to have experienced many disasters before they can ascend to the position of sovereign, and make all birds submit to them. Legend has it that when a phoenix lays an egg, it thinks of the many disasters that will befall its children in the future, and its heart is filled with grief, so it weeps blood and cries in sorrow. There seems to be a saying called, phoenix weeps blood. In short, this means that when a phoenix lays an egg, the eggshell will be stained with phoenix true blood. With your intelligence, you should understand what I mean. Yu Qianqiu made an "oh" sound, and shook the eggshell in his hand as he nodded repeatedly, and said, what you mean is that this eggshell is stained with phoenix true blood, and this phoenix true blood is very beneficial to Senior Yun. At least you are smart. Wei Chuanqiu praised him, and then winked as he used his elbow to nudge Yu Qianqiu, and said, look at how Senior Yun helps you protect the World Commerce Chamber every day, and even saved your life from the hands of Grey Cloud Exane last time. Even if he doesn't have meritorious service, he has worked hard. Shouldn't you show some appreciation? The meaning of these words was very clear. It was nothing more than asking Yu Qianqiu to give this phoenix eggshell to Yunpeng. When these words came out, Ren Yunpeng, who was usually very calm, couldn't help but tremble slightly. He turned his head, and didn't dare to look at Yu Qianqiu. Presumably, the heart in his chest was beating non-stop. Chapter 975. No problem. We're all a family, so it's not right if we don't help each other out. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and appeared to be exceptionally forthright. Yunpeng's body trembled as he turned around with an excited expression. He was preparing what words of gratitude he should say after Yu Qianqiu gave the item to him. Wei Chuanqiu laughed heartily as he patted Yu Qianqiu's shoulder and said to Yunpeng, old bird, how is it? I didn't misjudge you, did I? You followed me, didn't you? You didn't think you'd encounter such a great opportunity, did you? However, he was happy a bit too early. The item was said to be so precious that it could move Yunpeng's heart. With Yu Qianqiu's personality, it really wasn't in line with his personality if he carelessly gave it away. It won't be too late to give it away later. Yu Qianqiu took advantage of Wei Chuanqiu's happy moment to take back the piece of eggshell in his hand. He coughed and said, let me figure out what benefits this phoenix true blood has for Senior Yun first. I won't be able to bear the responsibility if something unexpected happens. The two's expressions immediately froze. Yunpeng saw him take the item from Wei Chuanqiu's hand and thought that he was going to personally give it to him. He was already prepared to take it, but who knew that these words would pop out? Wei Chuanqiu also thought that he was going to give it to Yunpeng, so he allowed him to take it back. Otherwise, with Wei Chuanqiu's personality, he would probably have kept a piece for Yunpeng even if he had to act shamelessly. Actually, this couldn't be blamed on Yu Qianqiu. He still had several dozen pieces of broken phoenix eggshells in his hands. How could he not figure out what they were used for? He couldn't just keep them in his hands like trash after knowing that they were treasures, right? At the very least, he needed to know how much he had helped Yunpeng so that he could ask for repayment in the future. You brat, you can't be thinking of going back on your word, right? Wei Chuanqiu naturally felt like he had been played. Look at what you're saying. My reputation is well known. Every spit is like a nail. My words are like a nail on a board. Unless the mountains have no edges and the heavens and earth merge together, I will not do anything that goes back on my word. Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and promised solemnly, I really want to know what benefits this phoenix true blood has for Senior Yun. I really want to know with a responsible attitude, whether or not there will be any accidents. Although these words sounded a little exaggerated, Wei Chuanqiu's expression finally became a little better. He thought to himself, as long as you promise to give, it's fine. If you dare to go back on your word, Grandpa will openly rob you. Bah. Accident my ass. Are you trying to play some tricks? He first expressed his doubts before explaining, the true blood of the phoenix is a precious treasure for birds. If one can absorb and refine it for their own use, not only can they borrow the power of the true blood to quickly increase their cultivation, if they are lucky, they can even obtain a chance to come back to life. After coming back to life, they will be like the phoenix, and their cultivation will be even more powerful. Of course, this depends on the amount of phoenix true blood on the eggshell. Resurrection from the dead. Oh my God, this is such a big favor. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but daydream absent-mindedly. I wonder what the effects will be after I absorb the true blood of the phoenix. I have the most phoenix eggshells. If I can be reborn like a crow in a critical moment, it will be too perfect. Looking at his drooling and wet dreams, Wei Chuanxiu could no longer see what he was thinking. It was more like he was stupid. He immediately sneered and said, "Stop daydreaming here. The true blood of the phoenix is useless to humans. Even if I pour you a few buckets of true blood of the phoenix, you will still be like this. It is only effective on birds of feathers like the yinpeng." Why? Yu Qianqiu suddenly woke up from his dream and asked with some grief and indignation. There is no why. In short, it is useless to humans. Wei Chuanxiu liked to see him like this. He sneered and said, "Forget about you, even I am useless. The true blood of the phoenix can only be absorbed by birds of feathers." Why? Don't try to fool me. Aren't you also a bird? Yu Qianqiu's voice became a bit louder. The grief and indignation of having his dreams shattered was clearly painted on his face. Although my original body also has a pair of wings, to be exact, I belong to the beast category and not the bird category. Although I am between the bird category and the beast category, I cannot enjoy the true blood of the phoenix. Wei Chuanxiu glanced at the eggshell in his hand and snorted coldly, "I don't even feel wronged." What are you feeling wronged for? You must know that everything in the world has its gains and losses. There are enough benefits from humans. Don't tell me you want to fight for this as well? Hearing him say this, Yu Qianqiu finally felt a bit better. He was suddenly startled and said, "Bat King Wei, you said you are between the bird category and the beast category. Could it be that the word beast originated from your bat clan? You are the beast. Do you want to die?" Wei Chuanxiu immediately became angry. Joking. Joking. Don't be angry, don't be angry. After making fun of the other party, Yu Qianqiu's heart finally felt a bit better. However, he still said unwillingly, "Even birds like Senior Yun and the others can obtain benefits from the God realm. Can't we also obtain some benefits from the God realm?" "Of course, as long as you have the ability to do it." Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up and he asked, "What kind of benefits?" Speaking of this, Wei Chuanxiu became serious and said with a serious expression, "Have you forgotten what I told you before? Among the top divine beasts in the God realm, dragons and phoenixes are revered. Legend has it that there is an illusory god in the God realm. Even the gods in the God realm have never seen his true body. No one knows if he is a man or a woman, and no one knows how high his cultivation is. Legend has it that this illusory god usually doesn't communicate with anyone but will directly communicate with dragons and phoenixes. It is said that dragons and phoenixes are his messengers. When he encounters something that needs to be done with force, he will order dragons to do it on his behalf while phoenixes are responsible for delivering his decrees. Dragons and phoenixes can be said to be his messengers. So awesome. You dare to play tricks in front of all living beings in the God realm, you're really amazing." Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a while and then he came to a realization, this matter is too far away. What does it have to do with the benefits you told me? Of course it has something to do with it. Your benefits are in the body of the dragon who is in charge of war. Wei Chuanxiu laughed and said, "Phoenixes have phoenix true blood, dragons also have coiling dragon true blood. The so-called coiling dragon has the meaning of occupying the land and overlooking all living beings. It represents the supreme of the dragon race. Ordinary dragons don't dare to be crowned with the title of coiling dragon. Its rank is equivalent to that of a phoenix that has gone through 9 tribulations. As long as you find the coiling dragon that is like a 9 tribulations phoenix, capture it and release some coiling dragon true blood, then smear it on your whole body to ensure that the toughness of your skin is unparalleled in the world. I reckon that the treasures in the immortal world won't be able to harm you at all. This benefit is not bad, right? TSK. If the coiling dragon true blood really has this benefit, then it is indeed very good. Yu Qianqiu suddenly reacted after a moment of relaxation. He said with a dark face, "Old bat, are you playing with me? Just think about it, the 9 tribulations phoenix was already very powerful. The martial envoy coiling dragon who was in charge of war was naturally even more amazing. If he had the ability to capture the coiling dragon and release his blood, then wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted in the immortal world? Even immortal Emperor Jin Tai wouldn't be a problem. There would be no need to go through so much trouble. What are you playing with? This is an ancient legend that I heard by chance from an elder. Ordinary people don't have the opportunity to hear it even if they want to. I'm telling you for free is already letting you off easy." Wei Chuanxiu pointed at Yun Peng, who was also listening with a face full of yearning, and said, "If you don't believe me, ask him if he has heard of it before." Yu Qianqiu looked at Yun Peng suspiciously. Yun Peng was startled for a moment before shaking his head at Yu Qianqiu. His white sword-like eyebrows suddenly trembled as he stared at Wei Chuanxiu and slowly asked, "The elder who told you these legends, could it be the one who told you about the past of Zheng, Yi, and Ming?" Wei Chuanxiu was startled for a moment before he nodded with a respectful expression and said, "I was really lucky to meet him and hear some stories from him." He said with a sigh as if he was very nostalgic. Seeing the two talking so mysteriously, Yu Qianqiu's curiosity was piqued again. When he heard the story of Tai Shu Zheng, demon god Yi, and the woman named Ming from Wei Chuanxiu's mouth, he once suspected something. Although immortal Emperor Jin Tai had ruled the immortal world for countless years, the era of Zheng, Yi, and Ming was long before Jin Tai. Almost no one in the immortal world knew about such a long time ago, but the elder Wei Chuanxiu spoke of was able to know the secrets of Zheng, Yi, and Ming. Obviously, he was not an ordinary person. "Bat King Wei, who is this elder you're talking about?" Yu Qianqiu curiously asked. However, after Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng looked at each other, they seemed to be a bit secretive and didn't say anything. The more it was like this, the more Yu Qianqiu's heart itched. He immediately threw the matter of being tricked to the back of his mind and pulled Wei Chuanxiu's sleeve like a child asking for candy. He chuckled and said, "We are all family, what is there to hide? If it's really inconvenient to say it, I won't force you. Why don't you find an opportunity to introduce me to this elder? Let me see the elegant demeanor of this senior. He still liked to walk the path of the higher-ups. Don't always pull and pull, okay?" Wei Chuanxiu pulled back her sleeve from Yu Qianqiu's hand and waved her hand with a dignified expression. "Don't ask me this again in the future. This elder is not someone you can meet just because you want to. Everything depends on fate. If you are really fated to meet him, you will meet him sooner or later. All right. Don't get sidetracked, give the thing to Yun Peng." Yun Peng also nodded with a dignified expression as if he knew something about this elder. After observing their expressions, Yu Qianqiu knew that it was useless to continue asking. It seemed that he would have to start with Bai Suzhen if there was a chance in the future and let Bai Suzhen ask Wei Chuanxiu. Presumably, with Bai Suzhen's help, they would be able to dig out the identity of this mysterious elder from Wei Chuanxiu's mouth. The reason why he was so curious was that people of Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng's age and level generally wouldn't easily call anyone elder. Even with immortal Emperor Jin Tai's power, age, and cultivation, the two of them wouldn't call him elder. If there was someone older, the two of them might call him old ghost, or something like that. But for someone like this to respectfully call him elder when he wasn't even in front of him, it was a bit strange. This person was most likely not simple. Chapter 976. Seeing the two's expressions, Yu Qianqiu knew that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of them. After some hesitation, he handed the 2 pieces of eggshells to Yun Peng. Yun Peng, on the other hand, was a little hesitant. If Yu Qianshou was an outsider, it wouldn't be a big deal for him to directly snatch it. But because of his relationship with Wei Chuanxiu, if he accepted it, he would owe Yu Qianshou a big favor. Wei Chuanxiu saw through his hesitation and directly took the things Yu Qianshou handed over. He slapped them into Yun Peng's hands and smiled. Why think so much? Don't be polite with this kid. The eggs he's gesturing at are so big, I believe there are more than these 2 pieces. If you don't have enough, then find him. As he said this, he looked at Yu Qianshou and teased, you won't be so stingy as to hide them from me, right? Yu Qianshou smiled noncommittally. Then, he asked curiously, since the Phoenix True Blood can help Senior Yun increase his cultivation, I wonder how much these 2 pieces can help you? Wei Chuanxiu only had a rough idea of this matter. The real inside story was probably only known by those who knew about it. He also looked at Yun Peng curiously. Yun Peng paused, his eyes flashed with a strange light. I can't say how much I can improve myself. The key is still how much Phoenix True Blood is on the eggshells. Maybe it's mid-stage Immortal Emperor, maybe it's late-stage Immortal Emperor, maybe it's not impossible to step into the God realm. It all depends on my luck. When he said this, Wei Chuanxiu and Yu Qianshou cried out in unison, God realm. Then, the 2 looked at each other in disbelief. Fuck. If he didn't invest now, then when? Yu Qianshou steeled his heart and immediately took out the dozens of eggshells. He piled them into Yun Peng's arms without hesitation. Yun Peng looked at the pile of eggshells in his arms. His face, which had always been calm, was unusually excited. The word, thank you, jumped out of his mouth. He really didn't know what else to say. Well done. Wei Chuanxiu excitedly patted Yu Qianshou's shoulder with great strength. Immediately, Yu Qianshou grimaced in pain. Wei Chuanxiu immediately apologized and helped him rub it. Yu Qianshou shook off Yun Peng's claws with one arm and smiled brightly at Yun Peng. We're a family, so we should help each other. You're treating me like an outsider if you thank me. I've given you all the phoenix eggshells. I hope your cultivation is as high as possible, so that we don't have to look at other people's faces. He was also a person who could take and let go. When it was time to make a decision, he would make a decision. There was no need to hesitate. Although the Phoenix True Blood was precious, it didn't have much use for him at the moment. Rather than keeping it to himself, it was better to sell a huge favor. He believed in his own eyes. Although Yun Peng was a man of few words, he was a man of character. Today, he had helped Yun Peng with all his might. In the future, when Yun Peng became successful, he would definitely repay him generously. After seeing this scene, Wei Chuanxiu twirled his mustache and looked at Yu Qianshou with a slight nod. His expression was full of praise. He didn't think that Yu Qianshou would be so generous as to give such a precious phoenix eggshell to Yun Peng without reservation. However, what surprised him even more was still to come. He saw Yu Qianshou take out a green bead the size of an egg. With a smile, he held it in his palm and brought it in front of him. Naiden. Yun Peng was startled. He didn't understand what the 2 meant. He was right. It was indeed the Naiden. Moreover, it was the Naiden that Yu Qianshou had stolen from Wei Chuanxiu. Looking at it now, it would most likely be returned to its original owner. Wei Chuanxiu naturally saw through Yu Qianshou's intentions. He couldn't help but feel excited. He wasn't in a hurry to receive the item. Instead, he ridiculed, "What's wrong with you today? Could it be that you found your conscience and are ready to turn over a new leaf? Don't say such useless things. I already said, we're all one family. There's no need to say such things." Yu Qianshou once again emphasized his philosophy of being a good person. He grinned and said, "I say, do you still want it? If you don't, then forget it." He acted as if he wanted to take it back. How could Wei Chuanxiu not want it? He opened his mouth and sucked. The green bead the size of an egg shone with a green light. It drilled into his mouth and went into his stomach. "This is your Naiden? How did you condense a Naiden?" Yun Peng's face was filled with shock. He didn't know that Wei Chuanxiu cultivated the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. Wei Chuanxiu glanced at Yu Qianqiu and smiled sheepishly. Don't ask anymore. When the opportunity is ripe, I'll naturally tell you the whole story. Yun Peng looked at Yu Qianqiu again. He couldn't figure out how Wei Chuanxiu's Niden ended up in Yu Qianqiu's hands. Seeing that Yun Peng still had a puzzled look, Wei Chuanxiu patted Yu Qianqiu's shoulder and changed the topic. Kid, your luck is a little too good. You can even pick up a phoenix egg? Maybe it's because my luck is good. Seeing that his exaggerated words caused the two to roll their eyes at him, Yu Qianqiu immediately changed his words and sighed, luck my ass. Logically speaking, I picked up this egg and hatched it with my own hands. This little phoenix should be close to me. But it's strange. This little bastard is like an enemy to me. Instead, he's as close as a sister to Shui. So heartless. Her. This might be the problem of your character that you were talking about. Wei Chuanxiu patted his shoulder and used his words to stop him. In the end, Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, heartless. Speaking of that phoenix chick. After putting away the eggshell, Yun Peng pondered for a while and said, although there are probably only a few people in the immortal world who have seen a phoenix, we still have to be careful. It's best to make it appear less often. Otherwise, it might cause big trouble. Hearing that, Wei Chuanxiu's playful expression also froze and became somewhat serious. Yu Qianqiu looked at the two of them suspiciously and asked, why? Because the phoenix's descent means that the world is about to be in chaos. Wei Chuanxiu said in a deep voice. There is such a saying. Yun Peng nodded and said, legend has it that a phoenix appeared 100,000 years ago. At the same time, it also brought with it a star orb that is said to be able to make people become gods. In the end, it caused a fierce battle between Jin Tai, Bai Qi, and the demon lord of 10,000 swords. That battle caused chaos in the three realms. Isn't this the sign that the phoenix's descent will cause the world to be in chaos? Although I don't know if it's a coincidence or if it's true, once others know that another phoenix has descended, the consequences can be imagined. Especially Jin Tai, I'm afraid he won't sit by and do nothing. So, it's better to keep this matter a secret. He had always been a man of few words. Today, he was able to say so many words of advice to Yu Qianqiu in one breath. It was obvious that he sincerely regarded Yu Qianqiu as one of his own. It was clear that Yu Qianqiu's generous act of buying people's hearts was effective. I understand. I'll go and tell them now so that they don't cause any unnecessary trouble. Yu Qianqiu turned and left with a solemn face. He naturally understood the seriousness of this matter. In the holy land of Baiwan nation's Wen family, in the forbidden area where Wen Lanfeng usually cultivated, Yan Zhuixing knelt on the ground, opened his arms and looked up to the sky. His expression was frighteningly distorted, and his nails had sunk deep into his palms. The blue veins on his forehead and neck were bulging ferociously. His eyes were bloodshot, and his face was flushed red. He knelt on the ground and shouted silently at the top of his lungs. After maintaining this state for a long time, he suddenly roared angrily, Yu Qianqiu. The continuous roar reverberated in the forbidden area. Fortunately, Wen Rui, who was standing respectfully at the side, had already set up a soundproof barrier. Otherwise, this roar would have alarmed everyone in the holy land of Wen family. Yan Zhuixing roared until there was no sound. Then, he hugged his head with his arms and fell to the ground. He curled up and panted heavily. His eyes were red as if he was a beast that wanted to eat a human. After being seriously injured by Yu Qianqiu last time, he hid in the Baiwan nation's imperial palace to recuperate. In order to maintain the smooth flow of information to the cultivation world, he set his eyes on Wen Lanfeng in the holy land of Wen family because he was confident that he could control Wen Lanfeng with his current cultivation. In the end, after sneaking into the holy land of Wen family with Shouchen's appearance, he did not find Wen Lanfeng after searching inside and outside. Instead, he found Wen Rui, who had been out of contact for a long time, and found that the other had broken free from the control of his demon eye. Wen Rui did not know Shouchen and was once again controlled by Yan Zhuixing due to carelessness. After asking, Yan Juixing found out that Yu Qianqiu already had a panacea in his hands to remove the control of his demon eye. Wen Lanfeng asked for a panacea to remove Wen Rui's control. After asking about Wen Lanfeng's whereabouts, he found out that Wen Lanfeng had long been summoned by Yu Qianqiu and had not returned. As for where he went, Wen Rui did not know due to Wen Lanfeng's secrecy. Since he'd taken control of Wen Rui once more, he couldn't avoid inquiring about the Myriad Devil Palace and Flower Palace. He'd more or less sensed that with Yu Qianqiu's ruthlessness, Yu Qianqiu would probably not let the Myriad Devil Palace and Flower Palace off. The result was not much different from what he had expected. Yu Qianqiu personally went to the Flower Palace to settle the score. Fortunately, Ma Jiugu of Fuxian Island arrived in time, and his mother and sister escaped. However, they were forced to leave the Flower Palace where they had lived for many years and fled to Fuxian Island. As for the Palace of 10,000 Demons, as expected, it had been completely razed to the ground. Yu Qianqiu had erased it from the face of the cultivation world. What made him most miserable was that his grandfather and father were forced to commit suicide in public to beg Yu Qianqiu to let the rest of the 10,000 demons go. In the end, after his grandfather and father shed their blood, Yu Qianqiu still killed the rest. The senior brothers left by Bing Qingzi also died together, and Yu Qianqiu did not let any of them go. At the thought of his grandfather and father being forced to commit suicide, Yan Juixing was in so much pain that he almost collapsed. He hated Yu Qianqiu, but he hated himself even more. He hated himself for being overconfident and not listening to his grandfather's advice. He hated himself for not knowing that there was always someone better out there. As a result, this disaster was brought upon him, and his family was forced to either die or escape. He fell to the ground with his head in his hands and quietly curled up. After a day and a night, he regained his indifference and slowly woke up from the ground. He gradually got up and walked out step by step. Wen Rui followed him respectfully. After a few steps, he saw Yan Juixing suddenly turn around and stare at him indifferently. "You don't need to follow me anymore. Just hide here and do what you should do. I hope I have a chance to summon you in the future." After saying that, he turned around and walked out with a resolute expression. Wen Rui respectfully saluted behind him and said, "This subordinate is always at master's command." Chapter 977. In Wenqing Palace, little Yan Yun's laughter continued. The demonic blade grew bigger and was swaying in the air while carrying him. Little Yan Yun shouted from time to time, "Father, shake it faster, shake it faster." Yan Juixing crossed his arms and looked at him with a doting expression. The hipster sat on the steps in the house with a blissful expression. Her knees were cushioned by a piece of white silk that was stretched tight with a bamboo strip. She was embroidering a butterfly that was about to fly. One of the pairs of butterflies had been embroidered, and the other one was almost done as well. It would be completed with just 2 tentacles. The hipster who was immersed in her embroidery would look up at the father and son from time to time. She would shake her head and smile warmly before continuing to embroider. She had completely shed the image of an unruly princess and was now a good wife and loving mother. Some people said that a good wife and loving mother was not born naturally. Most of them were formed after time. It was probably referring to women like her. She liked her current life very much and was very satisfied with it. The exciting cultivation world that Yan Juixing told her about was not tempting to her at all because it was too far away from her. She did not have too many desires and only hoped that her family could live peacefully like this. "Father, I want to ride a horse." Little Yan Yun, who was riding on the demonic blade, suddenly shouted. "Okay." Yan Juixing nodded amiably. The demonic blade flipped over and little Yan Yun landed in his father's arms with a cheer. The demonic blade also quickly shrunk and flashed into Yan Juixing's storage bag. Yan Juixing put down his son and knelt down on all fours. Little Yan Yun immediately climbed onto his back and sat on it, hitting Yan Juixing's butt with the back of his hand and shouting, "Giddy, giddy, giddy." Yan Juixing immediately smiled and quickly got up from the ground. Who would have thought that the great devil that shocked the cultivation world would do something like this? When the hipster saw this, her face immediately changed and she shouted, Yan Yun, don't treat your father like this. Get down now. Yan Yun pouted. Yan Juexing immediately turned around and smiled at the hipster. It's okay. If the kid wants to play with him. However, perhaps Yan Yun realized his mistake or was afraid of his mother who was fierce in appearance. He immediately slid down from Yan Juexing's back. Why are you unhappy? Yan Juexing raised his hand and scratched little Yan Yun's nose. Then, he carried him and sat beside hipster. Wen Qing glared at the father and son pair, then continued to bury her head in embroidering her butterfly. Seeing that his son was still looking away with a straight face, Yan Juexing immediately turned his little head over and frowned. Yun, don't be angry with your mother. Remember, when you grow up, you have to take good care of your mother, or I will be unhappy. Yan Yun pouted and said, don't I have father to take care of me? His words obviously still remembered the hatred of Wen Qing scolding him. He completely had the temperament of a child. If father goes far away, can't you help father take care of mother? As soon as Yan Juexing's words came out, Wen Qing beside him trembled and suddenly turned to look at him. After the expression on her face changed for a while, she didn't see any other meaning from Yan Juexing. It seemed that he was just educating a child. She then lowered her head and continued to embroider her butterfly, but the stitches were messy. It seemed that she was a little absent-minded and worried about something. Then I will take care of mother, but father, don't go too far away. Come back soon. Yan Yun threw himself on him and said while hugging his neck. Yan Juexing smiled and replied with an N. He gently patted his back and asked, if father goes far away, will you miss father? Wen Qing suddenly bit her lips while Yan Juexing glanced at her slightly. Yes. Why? Yan Yun propped himself up and looked at Yan Juexing righteously. He said, because father is the most powerful person in the world. I will think that father will teach me to be the most powerful person in the world when he comes back. The most powerful person in the world? The scene of Yu Qianqiu severely injuring him and causing him to flee appeared in Yan Juexing's mind, but he still said, okay. It's a deal. He held his son in his arms again and looked outside the palace with a resolute gaze. He thought to himself, father won't let you down. When father comes back, you will see the most powerful father in the world. I will also train you to become the most powerful person in the world. After all, a child's physical strength and energy were limited. After playing for a while, he soon fell asleep on Yan Juexing's shoulder. Yan Juexing gently carried him into the room and settled him down. Then, he came out and sat beside Wen Qing. He looked at Wen Qing who was embroidering and had a lot of thoughts. Finally finished. Wen Qing heaved a sigh of relief and pulled Yan Juexing's thoughts back to reality. She said with a smile, let me see how good madam's craftsmanship is. When he took the embroidery from Wen Qing's hand, his nose slightly twitched and he smelled a little blood. He glanced at Wen Qing's hand and saw a few small needle marks on her left index finger. Obviously, she was pricked by an embroidery needle. In fact, the embroidery needle was not sharp. It could be seen how absent-minded she was to be able to prick her finger. Yan Juexing looked at the embroidery carefully. There were 2 pairs of butterflies hovering on a big auspicious red peony flower. There were a few spots of blood beside the peony flower. Obviously, it was left by the embroidery needle when it pricked her hand. It's really beautiful. I can almost smell the fragrance of the peony flower. And these 2 butterflies are almost alive. I didn't expect the dignified by one kingdom's princess to have such craftsmanship. Yan Juexing glanced at Wen Qing, who was stunned at the side, and pointed at the tentacle of a butterfly. He shook his head and said, but the stitches here are obviously not tight enough. It's a little messy. Little Qing, are you thinking of something? Wen Qing came back to her senses and stared at him. She bit her lip and said, are you leaving again? Yan Juexing smiled and exerted force in his hand. The round bamboo strip with the white silk immediately shattered into dust. He shook the embroidery, folded it, and put it into his storage bag. He said with a smile, I want to keep this embroidery with me. Whenever I see it, I will think of you and Yun-er. The meaning in his words was very obvious. He had already indirectly answered Wenqing's question. In fact, the conversation he had with his son before was to let her be mentally prepared. Can you not leave me and Yun behind? Stop fighting and killing. Can't you just stay with us, mother and son, for the rest of our lives? Hipster suddenly knelt down in front of him, hugging his leg as she pleaded. However, Yan Juexing's indifferent expression as he looked outside the palace made her unable to continue pestering him. She could only take a step back and squeeze out a forced smile. Then how long will you be gone this time? When will you be back? Yan Juexing turned around and reached out to caress her cheek. He said with a smile, the reason I'm leaving this time is so that one day, our family can live together forever. I have already forged a demonic body and can live forever. Yun-er also has the aptitude for cultivation, so he can at least live for a long time. However, you. How can I bear to see you grow old alone? The image of her white hair while her husband and son were still young appeared in Wenqing's mind. She couldn't help but shudder and didn't know what to do for a moment. When she woke up from her daze, she realized that she had already been carried by Yan Juexing to the bed in the inner room. Needless to say, it was another flood of erotic light. After their indulgence, the two of them hugged each other naked. Yan Juexing caressed her smooth body and sighed, "You don't have to worry about Yun-er's future. I have already made arrangements in secret. When he grows up and starts to understand, there will naturally be people who will teach him what to do. Could it be that you are so heartless to abandon us and leave on your own?" Wenqing sobbed as she lay on his chest. Father's vengeance is absolutely irreconcilable. Besides, there's still grandfather, master, and a group of senior brothers. As long as a man is courageous, how can he endure humiliation to live? Yan Juexing slowly told Wenqing the information he had obtained from Wenrui in detail, so that she could understand the deep hatred she had to bear. It's you, Qianqiu, again. Why does he always make life difficult for you? Wenqing was gnashing her teeth in hatred. You are still young, only in your 20s. You still have many days to live. If there is still no news of me after 10 years, then don't wait for me. Change, find a good man and remarry. I don't blame you. After Yan Juexing said this, he ignored Wenqing's crazy sobs and directly pushed her to the side. He got off the bed naked. He walked to the center of the spacious room barefoot. He raised his hand and the devil blade flashed into his hand from the storage bag on the floor. He grabbed the devil blade with his right hand and fiercely slashed the palm of his left hand. He clenched his left hand into a fist and fresh blood immediately dripped onto the bright and clean floor. Blood splattered everywhere, and not long after, there was a large pool of bright red and dazzling blood on the floor. What are you doing? Wenqing on the bed cried out in alarm. She jumped off the bed in a panic and hugged him. Yan Juexing suddenly turned around and stared at her coldly. Did I waste my words just now? Go back to the bed and don't ruin my plans. With a wave of his hand, Yan Juexing lightly threw her back to the bed and cried. When the blood on the floor had almost accumulated, Yan Juexing suddenly opened his bloody fist. Black killing intent immediately enveloped the bright red wound on his palm. The wound became smaller and smaller, and soon, there was no scar at all. It was truly miraculous. Wenqing was dumbfounded. Only then did she know that he wasn't harming himself. There was indeed an important matter. Then she saw him put his hands together and holding the devil blade in between his palms while muttering to himself. No one knew what he was chanting. When the devil blade in his palm started to shine with a faint red light, he single-handedly grabbed a corner of the devil blade and twisted it like a spinning top. The devil blade that was emitting a faint red light suddenly spun in the air like a red ball of light. It lightly floated down to the pool of blood on the floor and began to spin. The pool of blood on the floor also suddenly emitted a faint red light, shining dimly and dimly. On the obedient island of the demon domain, a strong wind suddenly rose in the surroundings, whistling incessantly as if it was going to blow the house away. Lady Mu, who was sitting cross-legged in the house, suddenly opened her eyes and teleported to the side of the 1,000-mile lake. The wind was abnormally strong, causing her white dress to flutter. She couldn't help but look around strangely. One must know that the obedient island had always been sunny. Apart from man-made factors, there had never been such a strong wind. Chapter 978. However, the strong wind was only a prelude. After a while, dark clouds began to gather in the surrounding sky. The clear sky above the 1,000-mile lake was rapidly compressed by the dark clouds, shrinking at a visible speed. The demons and ghosts around the 1,000-mile lake all looked in the direction of the lake in bewilderment, not knowing if something big was going to happen. Lady Mu had lived in the demon-ghost domain for many years, but she had never heard of such an abnormal phenomenon above the 1,000-mile lake. For a moment, she looked around in surprise. All of a sudden, the rippling lake water around the obedient island became completely still. Not only the surroundings, but even as far as the eye could see, the entire lake had become deathly still. Not even the wind could move it, causing one's heart to sink. Lady Mu quickly released her divine sense to scan the lake water around Obedient Island. As a result, she found that the fish in the water were fleeing in terror, as if something terrible was about to happen. With so many abnormal phenomena gathered together, Lady Mu did not dare to hesitate and quickly took out a silver ball. Yu Qianqiu had told her that if there was anything abnormal in the demon-ghost domain, she should immediately report to him. Moreover, it was such a strange phenomenon, so she did not dare to delay. Otherwise, if something happened, she, a small tree demon, could not bear the consequences. Regarding the affairs of the demon-ghost domain, although Yu Qianqiu was a hands-off manager, once something really happened, he would immediately take the top priority to deal with it. After all, the demon-ghost domain was the foundation of the demon-ghost Immortal exterminating formation, the strongest line of defense against the strong enemies of the outside world. After receiving Lady Mu's call, Yu Qianqiu immediately put down everything he was doing and appeared on Obedient Island. However, as soon as he appeared, he was caught unprepared by the strong wind around him. He thought that he had gone to the wrong place, and then he realized that he had been ambushed. Purple flames quickly covered his body, and at the same time, he held the divine sword in his hand, intending to kill all the enemies who dared to ambush him. After quickly seeing the situation around him, he was slightly relieved. He immediately turned around and shouted angrily, "Lady Mu, what's going on?" Lady Mu was shocked by his powerful entrance with the divine sword in his hand and purple flames. His sharp and threatening murderous aura especially scared her so much that she was trembling with fear. Faced with the scolding, Madame Mu hurriedly bowed and said, "Mister, I don't know what's going on either. This abnormality happened just now." This little demon couldn't figure out the situation and didn't dare to delay, so she immediately summoned Mister to keep watch. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and stared sharply at Lady Mu's face. Seeing that she did not seem to be lying, he quickly retracted the purple flames and the divine sword. His robes fluttered in the wind. He then looked up into the sky and saw that the last ray of light had been completely annihilated by the dark clouds. From the looks of it, it was not far from Obedient Island. In the blink of an eye, the sound of the wind became even stronger, and the world became so dark that one could not even see their own fingers. There was a crackling sound of thunder in the sky, and bolts of lightning crisscrossed in the sky, illuminating Lady Mu's slightly frightened face. Ever since she grew up in the demon domain, she had never seen such a situation in the demon domain. Lady Mu looked at Yu Qianqiu with a panicked gaze. From time to time, bolts of lightning crisscrossed and flashed, illuminating Yu Qianqiu, who was standing with his hands clasped behind his back. Yu Qianqiu's expression was cold and emotionless. His eyes quickly swept around like an owl, and no one knew what he was thinking under his cold face. As the sky darkened and the thunder grew louder, a bright moon was held up by Yu Qianqiu, illuminating the surroundings with a vast expanse of whiteness. After the dazzling white light faded a little, the heaven's eye mirror showed the scene of a certain place in the demon domain. It was the entrance of the 9th netherworld cave. However, compared to the changes in the sky, the 9th netherworld cave was the same as usual. There was no abnormal phenomenon, eliminating the possibility of someone coming out of the netherworld. Then, the scene in the Heaven's Eye mirror quickly changed, scanning the entire demon domain at an extremely fast speed. Nothing could escape Yu Qianqiu's eyes. However, the strange thing was that after using the Heaven's Eye mirror to inspect the entire demon domain, he found that other places were the same as usual. There was no change except for the sky above the 1,000-mile lake, which was shrouded by the inexplicable dark clouds. Thinking of the position where the last ball of light had disappeared in the sky, Yu Qianqiu's eyes fell directly on the position corresponding to the surface of the lake. Lady Mu didn't know what he had found, so she also looked in that direction. Almost at the same time, the deathly still surface of the 1,000-mile lake gradually began to ripple. To be exact, the lake water began to swirl. At the position they were looking at, with that place as the center, a whirlpool gradually appeared. Boom! A thunderbolt fell from the sky and directly struck the center of the whirlpool. Then, boom! 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 A series of dazzling greenish-white thunderbolts struck the center of the whirlpool. The scene was extremely strange. Lady Mu secretly glanced at Yu Qianqiu, thinking that he might have found something since he had looked at that position in advance. Yu Qianqiu frowned. There was no mention of such a thing in the past torturer's history. What was going on? Could it be that there was? Yu Qianqiu's twinkling eyes paused. His pupils suddenly shrank as he stared at the center of the whirlpool. He remembered that below that position was probably the sealed entrance to the demonic realm. Last time, he had dived down to check, and it was almost in that position. Could it be that the entrance to the demonic realm was about to open? Yu Qianqiu was shocked when he thought of this. If the demonic realm opened, all the demons and ghosts of the demonic realm would come out one after another. How could he resist them alone? In an instant, all kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind. If that was really the case, he could activate the demonic ghost Immortal punishing formation, and summon Yunpeng and Wei Chuanxiu to help. Even if the heroic army turned out in full strength and all the cultivators in the human world resisted with all their might, they probably wouldn't be able to resist the numerous heroes of the demonic realm. That was the strongest force in the three realms that had once suppressed the immortal and netherworld realms. Moreover, if the situation became critical, the cultivators in the human world might not be willing to stand firmly on his side. If only Master Bai Changchun was here. As the whirlpool gradually expanded, the lake water surged layer by layer. It wouldn't be long before it was level with the land of Shantian Island. When Yu Qianqiu thought of how the demonic ghost domain had been awe-inspiring in the human world for so long, but now it was going to be destroyed in the hands of his generation, he felt indignant. After a moment of malevolence, he suddenly condensed his 5 claws and stretched them towards the whirlpool and the lake. Under the illumination of the flashing lightning, snow-white frost rapidly spread across the surface of the lake with a gag sound. In a short while, the huge area of the lake with the whirlpool as the center was frozen into a block. A whirlpool that was estimated to be 100 meters in diameter and dozens of meters deep was inlaid in the frozen lake. But it only paused for a few moments. A few bolts of lightning struck down and immediately smashed it into pieces. The lake water below stirred the ice and began to rotate again. Yu Qianqiu's 5 fingers moved again and immediately froze the whirlpool. However, a few more bolts of lightning fell from the dark clouds and easily shattered the frozen whirlpool. Yu Qianqiu didn't give in at all. He froze the whirlpool and the lightning in the dark clouds split apart. The two sides were in a stalemate. Realizing that this stalemate wasn't a solution, Yu Qianqiu's expression turned cold. After sealing the whirlpool, he didn't wait for the lightning in the sky to strike again. He flipped his 5 claws and clenched them into a fist. A ball of purple flames appeared in his palm. He raised it towards the sky and angrily shouted, "Scram!" The malevolent lightning in the sky immediately turned into weak arcs of lightning, faintly discernible in the dark clouds. As the thunder gradually died down, the arcs of lightning also gradually disappeared. As soon as Yu Qianqiu exerted force with the purple flames, he immediately felt that there was a mysterious force controlling the dark clouds in the sky. However, that force wasn't strong enough to resist the energy of heaven and earth that he controlled with the purple flames. Soon, the dark clouds in the sky seemed to have been punched through by his fist. They quickly melted and dispersed into the sky. Not long after, the sky above the 1,000-mile lake returned to blue skies and white clouds. However, the surface of the lake in front of him was now covered with a huge layer of crystal-clear ice. Lady Mu looked at Yu Qianqiu with lingering fear in her heart. She could feel the enormous energy under the pressure of heaven and earth just now. However, when Yu Qianqiu punched towards the sky, an even more enormous energy appeared. After he shouted angrily, "Scram!" the enormous energy that appeared later immediately crushed and assimilated the energy that the former had condensed. She couldn't imagine how high Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was. He was actually able to resist the power of heaven and earth. No wonder he was the torture envoy of the demon ghost region. The look in Lady Mu's eyes became more and more respectful. The power of the torture envoy was not something that she could resist. At this moment, she just wanted to do her part honestly. Yu Qianqiu wasn't in the mood to care about what she thought. He put away the purple flames and put down his raised fist. The scene in the Heaven's Eye mirror, in his other hand, once again swept across the entire demon ghost region. Yu Qianqiu's eyes were like an eagle's as he stared at the scene that flashed by quickly in the mirror. He refused to let go of the slightest suspicion. He concluded that the abnormality just now was definitely not a natural phenomenon. It had to be controlled by someone. Someone was actually targeting the demon ghost region, and it was targeting the sealed entrance to the demon realm. Currently, there were many people in the human world who had the ability and the need to do so. The first thought that came to Yu Qianqiu's mind was Yan Juexing. Except for Yan Juexing, who practiced the devil skill, he couldn't think of anyone else in the human world who wanted to get in touch with the demon realm. His judgment was that Yan Juexing had been repeatedly defeated by him. After the last battle, Yan Juexing knew that there was a huge gap between their strength, so he targeted the demon realm. He was afraid that the demon realm would ask for reinforcements to deal with him. He couldn't let Yan Juexing succeed. For a moment, Yu Qianqiu was full of murderous intent and became much more vigilant. In the Wenqing Palace of Baiwan country, Yan Juexing, who was standing naked, was shocked. He took a few steps back and spat out a mouthful of blood. He had just performed the great method of devil god to find the exact entrance to the demon realm, but it was inexplicably and forcibly interrupted. Immediately, he was backfired by the great method and harmed himself. The hipster cried out in alarm and ran off the bed naked to help him up, but he waved his arm to shake her off. Yan Juexing took a few steps forward and knelt in front of the hideous pool of blood, laughing wildly. "The entrance to the demon realm, the entrance to the demon realm, I found it, I finally found it." You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.